When I was in college, I always found myself daydreaming about the kind of spring break trips I saw plastered across social media. Those picture-perfect getaways to Cancun or Miami, where the sun seemed to shine a little brighter and the ocean sparkled just so. It wasn't that I didn't want to go. I simply couldn't afford the flashy vacations that all the sorority girls and frat boys seemed to take for granted. While they were sipping margaritas on sandy beaches and dancing in beachfront clubs, I stayed behind on campus. My first spring break passed quietly in the dim light of the library, where I buried myself in textbooks and term papers. By the time my second and third spring breaks rolled around, I had grown used to the rhythm of an empty campus. Sure, it was a little lonely, but it was peaceful, and I found solace in my studies. But as senior year approached, that peace turned into restlessness. I couldn't ignore the growing itch for something more. A real adventure that didn't involve fluorescent lights and late-night coffee runs to the library. Mexico was still way out of my budget, but I wasn't willing to spend yet another break in solitude. Thankfully, my girlfriend Sarah shared my sense of wanderlust and had an eye for finding hidden gems. One day, she stumbled upon a listing for a remote Airbnb in Sonoma County, California. It wasn't Cancun, but it sounded magical in its own way. A secluded cabin tucked away in the majestic redwood forests, surrounded by towering trees and utter tranquility. The cabin promised the kind of charm you'd see in a movie, complete with a steaming hot tub, a crackling stone fireplace, and even a telescope set up on the deck for stargazing. The thought of getting lost under a canopy of stars with no city lights to dim their brilliance sold me instantly. Sarah suggested we make it a group trip, and before long we had invited her best friend, Lily, and Lily's boyfriend, Ben, to join us on this little adventure. The four of us spent weeks planning, counting down the days like kids waiting for Christmas morning. When the day finally came, we packed up the car with everything we could think of: food, games, blankets, and of course plenty of wine, and set off for the woods. The drive itself was part of the adventure, with winding roads leading us deeper and deeper into the heart of Sonoma's breathtaking forest. When we finally arrived, the cabin took our breath away. It was even better than the pictures. A cozy, rustic escape that felt like it belonged in a storybook. Nestled so deep in the woods that no other houses were visible, it gave off a vibe that was equal parts serene and mysterious. That first night, we quickly fell into an easy rhythm, settling in by the fireplace with glasses of wine in hand. We played board games and laughed until our sides hurt, letting the warmth of the fire chase away the crisp chill of the forest air. But as the hours slipped by and the wine flowed, we couldn't help but notice how alive the cabin seemed. The wooden floorboards creaked under the slightest movement, and the wind outside made strange, ghostly sounds as it weaved through the trees. It felt as though the house had its own heartbeat, echoing softly around us. Every now and then, we'd pause, straining our ears to make sense of the noises, only to brush it off with a nervous laugh. After all, what was a cabin in the woods without a little mystery? The next evening, after a long day of exploring the trails around the cabin, we decided it was time to make good use of the hot tub. It had been beckoning us since we arrived, nestled on the back deck under the shadow of towering redwoods. The air was chilly, the kind of cold that nipped at your skin, but the steaming water promised relief. We slipped in, laughing as the warmth wrapped around us like a comforting blanket. With glasses of wine in hand, we gazed up at the stars that dotted the clear night sky. The telescope stood nearby, untouched for the moment, but the view above was mesmerizing enough on its own. We were mid-laugh, joking about our amateur stargazing skills, when a sudden blinding flash of light lit up the entire sky. The brilliance was so stark and unexpected that it left us momentarily frozen. Our laughter died in an instant, replaced by stunned silence. The light vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving us blinking into the sudden darkness. A second later, the cabin's power flickered, casting erratic shadows on the deck, and then went out completely, plunging us into a thick, all-encompassing blackness. For a few moments, the only sounds were the bubbling of the hot tub and our own sharp breaths. Then the wind began to howl, its mournful cry weaving through the trees, carrying with it the distant, haunting call of an owl. The atmosphere around us had shifted in an almost tangible way. The air felt heavier, the forest more oppressive, as if the trees themselves were leaning in closer, listening. Unease prickled at the back of my neck, and I hesitated before stepping out of the water. The cold night air was a shock against my skin, and I reached for a towel, wrapping it around myself as I moved toward the window overlooking the woods. The view outside was as black as ink, the only light coming from the pale, ghostly glow of the moon filtering through the canopy above. I squinted, trying to pierce the darkness, but it was futile. Just as I was about to turn away, a sharp snap broke the stillness. A twig, somewhere close by, cracking underfoot. My heart jolted. I spun around, my pulse thundering in my ears, but saw nothing but the faint shimmer of steam rising from the hot tub. I told myself it was probably just a deer, or maybe even the wind, but as I turned back to the window, the sound came again. This time it was closer, deliberate, like a footstep on dry leaves. A shiver ran down my spine, and I hurried back to the group, whispering what I had heard. We exchanged uneasy glances, trying to laugh it off, but the mood had shifted. The hot tub, once inviting and warm, now felt exposed and vulnerable. We decided to call it a night and retreated into the cabin. Inside, we huddled in the living room, lighting candles to push back the darkness. Sarah suggested we tell ghost stories to shake off the tension, so we took turns spinning tales meant to entertain and distract. But as the stories grew darker, so did the atmosphere. Shadows danced on the walls, and every creak of the floorboards felt amplified. A gnawing feeling crept over us, unspoken but shared. A sense that we weren't alone. Lily, clutching a blanket tightly around her shoulders, whispered that she felt like we were being watched. We all laughed nervously, brushing it off as paranoia, but deep down, none of us could shake the feeling. Just as the night's unease began to ebb and sleep tugged at our eyelids, the silence was shattered. A scream, piercing, blood-curdling, and impossibly close, ripped through the night. We bolted upright, every ounce of exhaustion replaced by sheer panic. It sounded human, but something about it was wrong, too raw and guttural to be entirely normal. We scrambled to the window, our breaths fogging the glass as we peered outside, but the forest was still, cloaked in shadows, offering no clues to the source of the scream. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches swaying faintly in the wind, as if mocking our fear. We didn't sleep that night. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, we made a collective decision. We were leaving. None of us wanted to admit just how unsettled we were, but it was clear that staying another night wasn't an option. While packing our bags, Sarah suddenly froze. "What's that?" she asked, pointing to the floor. There, etched into the wooden floorboards near the fireplace, was a strange symbol, a jagged, intricate design that none of us recognized. It hadn't been there before, we were sure of it. The sight of it sent a fresh wave of terror through us, and without another word, we grabbed our things and left the cabin behind. The drive home was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts, too shaken to speak. Even after we returned to the safety of our own homes, the experience stayed with us. The scream, the symbol, the eerie sounds of the forest, they replayed in my mind like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. In the days that followed, I tried to rationalize what had happened, but the more I thought about it, the stranger it all seemed. Eventually, my curiosity got the better of me, and I started digging into the history of the area where the cabin was located. What I found only deepened my unease. Reports of unexplained disappearances, strange sightings, and local legends that hinted at something sinister lurking in those woods. Even now, I can't help but wonder what we stumbled into that night. Whatever it was, it felt ancient and otherworldly, as if we had trespassed into a place we were never meant to be. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable or chilling? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more eerie tales and spine-tingling adventures.